everyone, welcome back to my second video tutorial. Today I'm going to be taking up vegetative propagation in plants. Let me first read out the objectives of this session, and by the end of this session you should be able to: number 1, define vegetative propagation; 2, recognize vegetative propagules in flowering plants; 3, classify the two types of vegetative propagation; 4, describe vegetative propagules of some common plants; and 5th, determine the advantages of vegetative propagation. So these are the 5 objectives that we have to cover in this tutorial. Well, in the first section of this lesson, we realized that diverse groups of organisms had evolved different strategies of reproduction. Some of the organisms can reproduce sexually, while certain other organisms can reproduce asexually. And if I have to have a quick review of the different modes of asexual reproduction that we have studied in the previous session, we learned about 4 different kinds of asexual reproduction, including fission, budding, regeneration, and spore formation. Apart from these 4 types of asexual reproduction, we have yet another kind of asexual reproduction in plants, and that is vegetative propagation. So, when we say vegetative propagation is an asexual reproduction in plants, what we need to understand here is this is a common kind of a technique that we observe in higher plants. I hope you remember what we have learned in our previous class. Higher plants are the flowering plants, or technically they are the angiosperms. So in flowering plants, commonly what we notice is if we have to grow a new plant, we basically think about the seeds. But do we require seeds all the time to produce a new plant? Absolutely not. The reason is because we also have vegetative propagation in these flowering plants. Now, what do we mean by vegetative propagation, or how do we understand the nature of this vegetative propagation? Well, when we say vegetative, it has to be non-reproductive. So vegetative refers to non-reproductive. If I have to relate this with the kind of the phases that we have learned in our previous video tutorial regarding lifespan, so we learned there that the first phase in an organism's lifespan is the juvenile phase. Juvenile, where we had understood that it is an immature young stage where the organism is not sexually ready. So that juvenile phase in the plants is known as vegetative phase. So instead of calling juvenile in the plants, we use the term vegetative, which is to say it is still in the non-reproductive stage. And that's the reason why vegetative propagation in plants can also be called as vegetative reproduction in plants. Okay, so vegetative should be relating with a non-reproductive part. So using a non-reproductive part of a plant, we can also grow a new plant, or we can also produce a new plant. And this technique of reproduction, this technique of asexual reproduction in plants is vegetative propagation. All right, so let's have the definition written for vegetative propagation. Alright, so it's an asexual reproduction in which a non-reproductive part or a vegetative part can produce a new plant. So this is a simple definition for vegetative propagation. Now, having said that, flowering plants can be generated from the non-reproductive parts of a plant. Let's now look into which are the non-reproductive parts in the flowering plant. And to understand this, I have a specimen here. So this is just a random pic from our garden. And just in case if you're curious, the name of this plant is balsam. Okay, it's a very common garden plant or flower. So we have learned about the different parts of a plant. So if you look into this balsam plant, if we have to look into or if we have to study the parts of the plant, we can see the roots, right, which grows underground. Then we have the stem, right, and on the stem, if you look closely, on the stem, we have these very unique structures. You might be able to see some kind of a bulbous structure. Okay. So these are the structures which we call as nodes, right? There are nodes. So you have nodes over here, you have another node, and the region in between the nodes, the region between two nodes is an internode, and which is a very, very characteristic feature for any stem. Okay, so we have the stem, and then coming off from the nodes, we also have, in this plant, we also have leaves, right? The leaves are attaching to the nodes. Then, if you have a close look, okay, at the axil of the leaf, you can also see tiny bud. So that is shoot bud. So we have the shoot buds, and then we also have these very brightly colored flowers, along with, in this plant you can see some kind of a pod here. So this is a seed pod. If you just press this, I should be able to see certain seeds. Okay, there are seeds inside this. So these are some of the common parts or structures in a plant, particularly in this balsam plant. Now the question is, which are the reproductive part and which are the non-reproductive or vegetative part of a plant? So I guess everybody knows, right? Flowers are basically the structures where they have the pollen grains, they have the ovary, they have the ovules, right? And then they have the gametes as well, and because of which they become the reproductive organ of the plant. And not only the flowers, later the flowers are going to be, after fertilization, the flowers are then going to be modifying and changing into seeds and fruits. Okay, so the seeds are the reproductive part of a plant, flowers are reproductive part of the plant, and the rest of the other parts, which includes roots, stem, even leaves, as well as these shoot buds. These are all the vegetative parts of a plant. Okay, are we all? So if we have to list the vegetative parts of a plant, right? If we have to list the vegetative parts of a plant, it can be the stem, it can be roots, or it can be leaves, or it can also be buds, shoot buds. So these are the different vegetative parts in a plant, and in different plants we can be even having these vegetative parts capable of producing new plants. And if we have these vegetative plants, giving rise to new plants. If they give rise to new plants. Because these are capable of, right? They produces new plant. Then these vegetative parts are even referred to as vegetative propagules. Okay, so we have a technical term which is to refer to any of the vegetative part of a plant which can generate a new plant. Okay, so these parts which can generate a new plant can be collectively called as vegetative propagule. I'm going to be writing it down here. They are called as vegetative propagules, which is to say these are the small parts, right? These are the small parts or the organs which can propagate, which can produce, which can form a new plant from its non-reproductive organ. And such structures are collectively known as vegetative propagules. So what could be some of the vegetative propagules of a plant? Vegetative propagules can be a stem, or it can be the roots, or it can be the leaves, or it can also be certain shoot buds. Vegetative propagation in plant is a kind of asexual reproduction. Now, how it becomes asexual reproduction? The reason is, in vegetative propagation, we only have the use of a single parent. And secondly, because there is no involvement of gametes, or because there is no involvement of fertilization, the new plants that are obtained through vegetative propagation are all completely identical to the parent plant. They are the clones of each other. That is to say, the new plants are completely identical to their parent plant as well as among themselves. Okay, and these are the reasons why we say vegetative propagation in plants is a kind of asexual reproduction. So, vegetative propagation is an asexual reproduction in plants. Right? Because why it becomes an asexual reproduction? Because number one, I would say it involves only one parent, which is to say it is uniparental. Okay, and secondly, there is no variation, or it produces genetically identical clones. All right, so no fertilization takes place, which results in production of clones. Production of clones. Right? So these are the reasons why we consider vegetative propagation as another type of asexual reproduction. So what do we mean by clones? Clones are, technically speaking, they are the complete identical copies of the parent, or they are the complete identical copies of their siblings. Okay, so in another way, I'm going to be writing this as clones are morphologically and genetically identical to their parent or among themselves. Okay, so clones are morphologically and genetically identical to their parent or among themselves. Now, morphologically, in the sense, physically, they have the same kind of the structure or appearance. And genetically, which means to say they have the exact copy of their parental DNA. Nothing has changed. It is the same DNA which they have received from the parent plant. So they are morphologically and genetically identical to their parent as well as among themselves, which means to say among the siblings. So such kind of individuals are known as clones, and clones are usually the products of asexual reproduction. Okay, and these are the reasons why we say that vegetative propagation can also be considered another kind of asexual reproduction in plants. Next, we need to understand what are the ways through which these vegetative propagules can be generating a new plant. And to understand this, let's look into the next section, which is to categorize the vegetative propagation in plants. So basically, we have two main types of vegetative propagation carried up in plants, right? They are the natural vegetative propagation and artificial vegetative propagation. So we have two types of vegetative propagation. There are two types of vegetative propagation, namely so the two types are natural vegetative propagation and artificial vegetative propagation. I guess it's easily understandable. What we mean by natural vegetative propagation is that during this process of reproduction or the propagation of plant, the plants are going to be reproducing naturally by themselves without any kind of an influence from external factor, right? So it occurs naturally in nature. Whereas when we have the artificial vegetative propagation, artificial means to say here it is not happening in nature on its own, but then we have the vegetative propagation being carried up by humans. Okay, and this is a very, very common practice which many of the agriculturists and many of the horticulturists have explored by understanding the science of vegetative propagation. Now in this section of our understanding, my focus would be more on the natural modes of vegetative propagation. Alright, and at the end of this session, I'm going to be assigning everybody an activity which you have to be doing at home, and that activity should be giving us a kind of an experience, an application of artificial vegetative propagation. Next, we will look into some of the vegetative propagules of common plants. Alright, as we have understood from the previous discussion that the vegetative propagules can be a stem, can be a leaf, can be a root. So in the first understanding, let's take up vegetative propagation through stem. Alright, so let's say stem propagules. Just to save time, I'm just going to be writing directly stem propagules. Alright, so for stem, to understand the stem propagules, we will look into some of the major different types of stem propagules. So I'm going to be taking up stem propagules which are the underground modified stems. So we will talk about underground stem. Okay, we will take up some of the underground stem as an example for vegetative propagation. Then we will also talk about few subaerial stem or stems. Alright, we will also be taking into few of the examples of aerial stems which can be even participating in vegetative propagation, and we can also check stems which are called as bulbil. Alright, so these are basically some of the different types of stems which we commonly see as a vegetative propagule. Okay, so for understanding the vegetative propagules as an underground stem, right, we are going to be first taking up a very common propagule of an underground stem, which is tuber. Now when you hear this word tuber, it might sound a little new to you, but the example that we have here is very familiar, right? A common plant that has tuber as its modified stem is potato. And you have all seen potato, or you have all eaten potato, and you all know about the potato plant. Just to give you a better idea, I have a specimen here. Okay, now because you are at home as well, it's a good time, it's a good opportunity for all of you to be even visiting your kitchen, because I would say kitchen is one of the place where you can see a lot of science taking place. All right, so yes, I have a potato tuber. So this is a potato tuber. It's not a normal stem, it's a modified stem because it grows underground, and it's not like the other stem. It's not erect, it's not supportive. It is fleshy, it's a fleshy, thick, all right, kind of a swollen stem which you find it underground. And in this potato tuber, now the reason why we consider this as a stem is because it possesses a very important structure here that you might have seen. So if you look closely, you have these structures, which we even commonly refer them as eyes. So they are the eyes of a potato tuber. Right? Now what do we mean by these eyes? Actually, these eyes are, technically speaking, these are the nodal regions. These are the nodes of potato tuber. So you have nodes in the potato tuber, and because of which it doesn't become a root, it is a stem. Right? It's a modified stem, and the name of this modified stem is tuber. Now if you look closely in these eyes, you do find a tiny bud. So the eyes have a tiny bud, okay, in there, along with even, you can also feel it, okay, it even has a very tiny scaly leaf just near this bud, right? So this kind of the tuber carrying a bud eventually would be growing, right? They will be dividing, they will be growing, and after certain days, what you can also see is, you can also see some, can you see some very short greeny structure coming out from there, from the bud? Yes, so this is a leafy shoot which is arising from the bud. And now if you cut this eye, or if you cut this node of this potato tuber and grow it in the soil and give all the necessary condition for it, you will be having a new potato plant coming out, right? And that's the reason why potato tuber is an example for vegetative propagules. And the nature of this vegetative propagule in the potato tuber is that they have these eyes. Okay, they have these eyes, and these eyes are the structures which are actually capable of producing new potato plant, right? And because of which we say potato is a good example for an underground stem which can be causing vegetative propagation. All right, so this is one of the types of underground stem. Likewise, we also have other types of underground stems. For example, the next example that I'm going to be taking, or the next type that I'm going to be taking, is we have rhizome. So we have rhizome as another type of an underground stem, which is also a vegetative propagule. So now what is a rhizome? A rhizome is a modified underground stem. And the common example that we can take for rhizome is, let's take up ginger. Right? Ginger is a very common example for rhizome. And by hearing ginger, everybody should be knowing how a ginger is. So I have a specimen again for you. So this is a ginger, and this is also a stem, right? And the ginger stem that is growing underground, this ginger stem is technically referred to as rhizome. It's not a tuber, it is a rhizome. And you do have a structural difference as well from that of the tuber. The tuber was more of a swollen structure, bulky structure, which grows even kind of vertically. But then this is a stem, a fleshy stem, elongated fleshy stem, all right? But this grows horizontally. So the ginger is growing horizontally. It's a horizontal underground modified stem, right? It grows horizontally, whereas the tuber, that is a potato, isn't a rhizome. Okay, so now in the ginger, again, because this is a modified stem, so this should be having nodes. So if you look closely, right, you do find some lines on the ginger. Okay, these lines on the ginger are the nodal regions. These are the nodes of the ginger, right? And at some places in the ginger, at these nodes, you might be able to see even buds. Okay, so the buds arises from the nodes, and they also have some scaly leaves, very tiny scaly leaves on the buds, right, surrounding the buds. And these buds, eventually, they grow in size, and from that, we are able to be even getting these short, tiny, green leafy shoots, right? And if you plant this ginger in the soil, again, you should be able to get a new ginger plant. And it can be also spreading, right? Because they can, again, this one can be growing horizontally. Then in the nodes of these horizontal rhizome, they can even have yet another bud. And that bud can then be forming new shoots, and it can become into another of ginger plant. Okay, so in this way, ginger is another example for a vegetative propagule, and this kind of a vegetative propagule, which is a modified stem, is called as rhizome. Right? So that is our second type of underground stem. Third, so the third type of an underground stem is, let us take a bulb. Okay, so we have another type of a modified underground stem known as bulb, and a common example to keep in mind is onion, or it can be even the garlic, right? So yes, onion are again underground stem. These are the modified underground stem, and these modified underground stems are called as bulb, right? So you can see the onion, right? This is a modified underground stem. And if you look into the onion, you can notice some kind of scaly leaves, right, on the outside. So these are protective leaves on the outside, all right? And then if we have to know which exactly is the stem here in the onion, the whole of the onion isn't the stem, right? The stem is this very highly condensed, can you see the hard portion here? A disc-shaped structure. So this hard disc-shaped structure in an onion is the modified stem. And the name of this stem is bulb, because it has a kind of a more kind of rounded structure, disc-shaped structure. And not only that, this disc-shaped stem, that is the bulb, is surrounded by, it is surrounded by many layers of fleshy leaves, right? So if I peel this onion, so it looks quite bad here. So if I peel this, you have the fleshy leaves, right? And at the center of this onion stem, which is the bulb, there's a bud. There's a central bud, and that from that central bud, eventually we can be also seeing such kind of leafy shoots growth. Okay, so if I now plant this onion, that is this modified bulb, in the soil, I should be able to be getting new onion. That is to say, I will be having new the kind of spring onion or the green onions, right, out of such bulb. Okay, so onion is an example for the vegetative propagule, which is a kind of an underground stem, and the name of these underground stem is bulb, which we see in onion as well as it can be found in garlic. Okay, next, to talk about yet another type of underground stem propagule, we have corm, C-O-R-M, corm. These are called as corm, and corm is commonly seen in, I'll take up an example, which is you can see the corm in Gladiolus, a flower called as Gladiolus. Gladiolus, Gladiolus. It's a flower which is also a common flower in India. So this is Gladiolus. Okay, and in the Gladiolus, we see the structure here. This structure is a modified stem, and this is a stem because, like we have discussed in the previous cases, it too has nodes and internodes. Can you see the lines there? So those are the nodes. But this is unlike the bulb or unlike the tuber, this is more spherical. Okay, a corm is more spherical, more rounded. It grows vertically, and it even has these roots, that is the adventitious roots, the roots arising from the stem. Okay, so at the base of the stem, you can also find these adventitious roots, and we have a more spherical kind of stem that grows underground. And from these nodes, again, the nodes are going to be having leafy scales as well as they're going to be having buds. Okay, and these buds, I can also see a kind of a bud here. Can you see a bud arising at the tip of this? All right, and these buds eventually will be growing, and then they're going to be clumping up, and you can have even many of such cormlets, such tiny corms on the surface of the corm. This kind of a big corm, right? And these corm can also be again giving rise to a new plant, that is a new gladiolus. Right, so you can just divide the corms. If you have many corms, right, you can divide the corm and then plant each of those corm into the soil and then get new plants. And that's the reason why corms are also another kind of underground stem modification, which is also a vegetative propagule in Gladiolus, as well as you can see corms in crocus. All right, so with this, I will just proceed to the next type of stem, which can also be used as vegetative propagule. And these types are called as the subaerial stem. Okay, so when we say subaerial, aerial means it has to be above the ground. Okay, so these stems are subaerial stem, meaning it means to say that the stems are not growing erect, but then they are just growing horizontal to the soil surface, to the ground surface. Okay, so they grow horizontally. Okay, they are just touching the soil or the ground. Okay, and in such kind of subaerial stem, we will take up certain different types of subaerial stems, which can also be the structures for vegetative propagation in different plants. Now, to take one such subaerial stem, let's start with a subaerial stem known as runners. Okay, they are known as runners. Now, a common example for runner is, you can say, grasses. These can be found in grasses, or these can also be found in mint. Okay, mint. So right now what I have is, I have a mint cut here. Okay, so what you can see is, this is a stem, right, which is found just close or just touching on the surface of the ground, and it grows horizontally as well. It grows horizontally. All right. Now, this is a stem because, as we know, they have nodes, right, and they have internodes. And what we also see is, from the nodal region, we can also see the nodes also form these very slender root structure. Do you see? Right? So these roots which appear at the nodal region of the stem, they are the adventitious roots, because they are not coming off from the radicle, they are coming off from a stem, right? So these are the adventitious roots, and once they have the roots, right, what can happen is, if we cut the stem from the parent stem, right, if this stem, suppose if this stem detaches from the parent plant, this stem, because it has its own root, right, and because the roots are growing into the soil, and because they can be deriving the nutrients, and they have their own leaves and things, so this can be propagating, and this can be, in a way, it can be developing into a whole new plant, okay, on its own. And such kind of stems where we have horizontal stems, okay, horizontal stems with lots of you can see branching. So from one point of the node, you can have many of such runners. Okay, from a single node we can have many runners, and each of these runners on breakage can also be surviving as a new plant, or can be surviving as a different plant. And that is why runners are a kind of subaerial stem which we see in grasses, in many of the grasses, as well as in the mint, and they can be one of the vegetative propagules for propagating such plants. Okay, so this is an example for runner. Then secondly, we'll talk about stolon. So another type of subaerial stem is stolon. And what do we understand by a stolon? So what's a stolon? To understand stolon, the most common example that we can think about is strawberries. Strawberry. Okay. So how a stolon is different from a runner? Basically, a stolon is also a subaerial stem, right? And these stem, unlike the runners, they will not be in close contact with the ground. So these stem arises from the nodes, right? They form a kind of a branch. The stem becomes a branch, and at the tip of the branch, when the plant is going to be carrying certain amount of leaves, because of the weight of the leaves, the stem starts to bend. Okay, and so this is the main plant, right? This is the main stem. Then we say from a node, from some point node, we have a branch here, a branch stem here, and this stem, after a certain time, this stem can form leaves. at the tip of the stem, right? And because of the weight of this leaf, the stem might bend. It starts to bend, right? And such kind of a bent stem, right? Once it touches the soil, from the node of the stem, you will have adventitious roots coming out, and as a result of which, right, these roots can now anchor to the soil or to the ground. And once we have a cut of the stolon from the parent body, this stolon can then grow and can become into an independent strawberry plant. So such kind of the subaerial stem, which is a bent stem, right? A bent stem which carries adventitious roots, right? And which can then grow out into a new plant or an independent plant is a stolon. Okay, and this is commonly seen in a strawberry. To get a better idea, you can also check into the image here. Okay. All right. So this is our second type of subaerial stem. Next, we are going to take up the third type of subaerial stem. Okay, and this third type of subaerial stem is called as offset. It's called as offset, right? And offset is a common occurrence in plants such as I would be taking up Eichhornia. 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 Okay. I don't know if you have heard about this plant. It's a very interesting plant. Eichhornia, or it's even called as water hyacinth. So, in the Eichhornia or the water hyacinth, what is present is it's very similar to the runner. Okay. In fact, offsets are also called as single internode runner. Offsets are even called as single internode runner. Okay, so the other way to understand the nature of offset is it's a single internode runner, which means to say that it's a kind of runner, but a difference that we have of the offset from the runner is that these offsets have only a single internode, right? In the previous discussion, what we have seen was in these runners, they are different from runners because in a runner, we can have many runners from a single point, from a single node, point of origin, right? Whereas in the offset, it grows horizontally, right? Our offset would be even growing horizontally. But the difference is it just would be having only a single internode, okay? You don't have any more of the offsets arising from a single point. It just is a single internode, and such kind of a single internode runner is also a vegetative propagule because from the nodes, right, they can even be developing adventitious roots. And once these adventitious roots are present, then the roots can be taking up the nutrients and the required essential material from the soil or from the water. Now in this case, it's an aquatic plant, so it can be deriving the nutrients from the water. With the help of these adventitious roots, it can be living on its own, right? So if we have a cut of the stem from the internode, the cut piece of the offset can also be giving rise to a new Eichhornia, or it can be even forming into a new water hyacinth. So this is this kind of the vegetative propagule or a subaerial stem in the water hyacinth is an offset, right? What we also need to be understanding here relating to the Eichhornia is why I consider this as an interesting plant is because Eichhornia isn't a native plant of India. Eichhornia is an exotic species, meaning to say Eichhornia has been introduced to India. Eichhornia actually is a native species of South America. Now, why Iconia was introduced here to India is because Iconia possesses a very attractive flower, and it also has a kind of a very beautiful or attractive rounded leathery leaf. So it's considered to be a good ornamental plant, initially I would say, right? But right now, Iconia, because it has the ability to be reproducing vegetatively, because these offsets, which is a modified stem, right, of Iconia, because these offsets on breakage can be giving rise to new Iconia or can be propagating. Iconia has now become a very invasive weed, aquatic weed. So nowadays, Iconia isn't considered to be that really helpful or a kind of attractive plant. Rather, it has become an invasive weed. We call now Iconia as a weed. The reason is because they have the rapid propagation. They can easily propagate, and they have almost covered most of the freshwater bodies across the country. And particularly, this has become kind of a major problem in the region of West Bengal, and due to which Iconia is also referred to as terror of Bengal. So can you see here? Iconia also called as the terror of Bengal. Now, why terror? Terror because Bengal is a region where we have a lot of freshwater bodies, and people commonly have fish as one of their staple foods. So now, because of the invasiveness of the Iconia, it has covered almost all of the freshwater bodies, and thereby these highly invasive water hyacinth has drained all the oxygen out of the water. Okay, they consume all the oxygen out of the water, and that had decreased the population of aquatic species, including the fishes. So the population of the fishes had a dramatic decline because of the introduction of or the invasiveness of these Iconia, and hence they are now known to be the terror of Bengal. Okay, so that's just a kind of side discussion related with Iconia, and we are going to be taking up or discussing about this later in one of our ecological chapters. So in Iconia, coming back to the vegetative propagation, the means of vegetative propagation is offset. Okay, it's a kind of a runner, but it only has a single internode. It doesn't have any of many of the branching out of the runners. It's just a single node, internode containing runner. Okay, so that finishes with our discussion about the second type of vegetative propagation, which are the subaerial steps. Okay, next we will be taking up vegetative propagation as aerial stems. So some of the aerial, commonly most of the stems are aerial, that is to say they grow outward, okay, and they are the aerial stems. But when I say aerial stem here as vegetative propagation in some of the plants, so in the aerial stem, the common example that I would like to take up here is, let's think of sugarcane. Okay, have you seen sugarcane plant? Yes. So sugarcane plant is a kind of an erect plant with even a kind of a hard stem. Okay, hard thick stem. And if you have noticed, in the sugarcane plant, the stem at its node has these roots coming off. Now some of you might have recalled our previous class, even one of the lessons regarding such type of adventitious roots. These are the adventitious roots called as the stilt roots, right? So we had these adventitious roots, coming out from the nodal regions of sugarcane stem, and because of which, now if you cut the sugarcane plant close to the nodes, right, and grow them in a good soil, you are likely to be getting more sugarcane plants. Okay, and because of which aerial stem is, in some of the plant, aerial stem can also be a good source of vegetative propagation, right? And here I would like to be adding up another example, which is sugarcane, and we can also see this in bamboo plant. Do you know bamboo plant? So we do have some bamboo plants even in our vicinity. Now bamboo plants are even very interesting. They are very interesting because bamboo plants are a plant that flowers only once in their lifetime, which is to say that they only have a single period in their life cycle during which they can produce seeds and they can reproduce sexually. But the fact is, even though they can be having only a single flowering season, or they can flower only once in their lifetime, we do have many bamboo plants growing all over. So how this is possible? This is because even in bamboo plants, okay, in their aerial stem, bamboo plant also has aerial stem, erect, right, kind of a sturdy stems. And if you look into the bamboo plant stem, at their nodes, they can be giving rise to many of new branches. And these new branches, which are at these nodes, right, eventually at the end of these branches, they also will form adventitious roots. And because they have this kind of the growth taking place from their nodes, now what we can do is, or what the bamboo especially growers are doing, is that they cut the bamboo right near to the nodes. Right? They cut right near to the nodes where they have these new tiny branches coming off, right? And then when these cut stems are grown into a suitable soil or a suitable medium, then we can be even attaining new bamboo plant. So bamboo is another example for how the aerial stems can be used for vegetative propagation. All right. Finally, for the understanding about vegetative propagule as a stem, we have bulb bill. Right? Now, what do we mean by bulb bill? Bulb bill, in a simple sense, means small, tiny bulb-like structure. These are not true bulbs, but then they are tiny bulb-like structures. And these bulb bills are a common occurrence in a plant such as agave. This is an example which is given in your textbook as well. So we have a common plant known as agave, and in agave what they have is they have bulb bills. The bulb bills in the agave are carried at the should I say at the tip of the plant body, where they have the floral inflorescence, right? So these tiny bulb-like structure which are present at the axis, it can be between the leaf and the stem axis, or it can be also in the inflorescence, as in the case of agave. So once these bulb bill fall off or break off from the inflorescence or from the axis, they can be again forming adventitious roots by itself, and eventually they can be growing into a new agave plant or a new plant. And hence bulbil is yet another example for a stem propagule. Okay, so with this we finish with the stem propagules in some of the plants. So what we have learned here is the stem propagules can be an underground stem, and in the underground stem we do have different types of underground stems, such as it can be a tuber, it can be a rhizome, it can be a bulb, or it can be a corm. Then we also have subaerial stems, which can be even used as vegetative propagules. And for subaerial stems we have different types as well, like we have the runners, we have the stolon, we have the what was that? The third one, runner, stolon, and offset, right? Then as a yet another type of stem propagule, we have aerial stems, right, which can also be used for vegetative propagation, the ones that we see in bamboo and sugarcane. And finally we had learned about the bulbil. Bulbils are bulb-like structure, not true bulbs, but bulb-like structure. These are bulbous structure, tiny structures which can, on breaking off from the parent body, they can be giving rise to a new plant, right? So these are the different types of vegetative propagules, which are all of the stem type. Let's now proceed to the root propagules. So to understand the nature of vegetative propagation, which can be done through roots, I would be taking up a common example of a root, which is tuberous root. And these tuberous roots are commonly seen in plants such as, this is a flower, such as dahlia. Okay, this is commonly seen in dahlia, or yes, we can also take sweet potato as an example for tuberous root. So tuberous roots are very effective structures which can be helping in vegetative propagation of dahlia as well as sweet potato. Now, unlike the potato, right? Unlike the potato, this particular root, that is the tuberous root, right, is very different. The reason is these tuberous roots do not have any nodes. They lack nodes. And because the dahlia, which has a kind of a similar, if you go by appearance, it might be having a similar kind of an appearance to the potato or a kind of a gladiolus tuber, right? It might be looking like a tuber, but it's not a stem. The reason is because these lack nodes. Okay. Now, the tuberous roots of dahlia and sweet potato, right? They can also be having buds on their surfaces. So the roots, you might have seen, like sweet potato, right? So you might have seen a sweet potato. If you look closely to the sweet potato root, tuberous root, at some points, you might be also seeing tiny buds on the surface of the tuberous roots, right? And these buds can later be, and the buds even carry scaly leaf surrounding it. And when these buds they start growing, right, they will be then giving rise to a shoot. So from the buds you can also get new shoots, right? And because of which we say tuberous roots are a propagule, a good vegetative propagule in some of the plants, through which we can have the reproduction taking place, or we can say we can have the production of new plants. Okay, so this is how we have the understanding about root propagules. And finally, I'm going to be going into another type of vegetative propagule, which can be leaf. So for understanding leaf as a propagule, as a means of vegetative propagation, we have the common example that we can take up for leaf propagule is, we can think about the leaf buds. Okay, leaf buds, and the common example for leaf buds is bryophyllum. Okay, in bryophyllum as well as in some begonia, we do find buds growing at the margin of the leaves. Okay, so you can look into even the image that's shown here. So if you look into the leaf margin, okay, the leaf margin, at certain point of the leaf margin, we do find some tiny buds arising out of it, and then these buds eventually grow and then they develop their own adventitious roots as well as leafy shoots. Okay, and such kind of the leaf buds, once they detach from the main leaf and they fall on a suitable surface, or let us say a good soil, then they can be forming into a new bryophyllum. Okay, so this is a very common kind of occurrence in bryophyllum as well as in many other plants, including begonia. Okay, so these are the ways through which we understand that a plant commonly, that is the flowering plants commonly can be vegetatively propagated. So what are the advantages of vegetative propagation? To think about a few of the advantages of vegetative propagation, because vegetative propagation involves only a single parent, and because we have the production of new plant just from a small part of the older plant, vegetative propagation is basically very helpful in creating many clones out of the parent plant. Okay, so the first advantage of vegetative propagation is it produces clones. So we can easily attain many identical copies of the same parent plant. Secondly, because vegetative propagation doesn't involve fusion of gametes, because there's no scope for the exchange of genetic material, vegetative propagation can also help in the maintenance of the purity of genes in the progeny, as well as it can also be a great help in terms of maintaining with the desirable traits which are there in the parent plant. So the traits, the high quality traits can be perpetuated from generation to generation. Okay, so it maintains desirable traits from generation to generation. Likewise, another important advantage of having vegetative propagation in some of the plants is that there are plants which cannot be producing much of a viable seed. That means to say they cannot be producing seeds which are good enough to grow into a new plant. So in such plants, vegetative propagation can be a very important alternative way to propagate and to continue with their species. Right? So the third advantage, it helps plants with non-viable seeds to propagate. So propagation of such plants having non-viable seeds can be easily done through vegetative propagation. And finally, I can say that vegetative propagation is a very simple mode of asexual reproduction in plants, and it's also a kind of an inexpensive way through which we can increase the plant productivity, as well as this is a method which can be giving us the new plants in a very short span of time. It's a very rapid method of propagation, right? So last one, it is easy to propagate, okay, and it's even inexpensive, so to say. It is inexpensive and let's say a rapid method of propagation. Rapid method of propagation. So these are the 4 advantages that I'm listing here for vegetative propagation, and you can also think about certain other good reasons for saying that vegetative propagation is of benefit to the flowering plants. Alright, so with this we actually come to the end of my tutorial here. Alright students, now please pay attention. I come up here at the end of this session with a challenge for you all, and this challenge can be easily taken up by each one of you at the safety of your home. It's a very simple thing. Since we had this as another way of vegetative propagation, right? When we were trying to look into the 2 different ways of vegetative propagation, so we said not only vegetative propagation can happen naturally, but it can also be done artificially. And my challenge is, yes, you are going to be doing vegetative propagation by yourself, right, at your home, and that activity is related directly with one of the types of artificial vegetative propagation. So in the artificial vegetative propagation, commonly we have these as the artificial ways of propagating a plant. It can be by cutting, or it can be by layering, or it can be by grafting, or it can also be by a very interesting technique, new technique known as tissue culture. Right? I'm not going to be going into the details of any of them, but then yes, for this activity which we are going to be doing, which we are all going to be doing at home, this is directly a kind of artificial reproduction, vegetative reproduction, that is through cutting. Okay? Yes? And I would be expecting all of you to be doing this activity during this week, and probably by the end of the week, by May 10th, okay? By May 10th, you should all be sharing with me either a photo of yourself doing vegetative propagation, or you can also have a video recording of you doing vegetative propagation at your home. Alright? Okay? So don't forget to share with me with your signs at home. Alright? So what do we need for such vegetative propagation? I'm just going to be having a demonstration for you. It's very simple. So we have to have a kind of a potting for a planter, right? So to do this, right now what I'm having is, this is a 2-liter Coke can, right? So I have cut this, and then I've made some holes even. I don't know if you can see, all right? So that the water can drain well if it becomes excess. All right, so I have such a kind of recycled planter, right, a pot. Then I'm going to be having in this a good potting soil. Right, so let me add so here I have, okay, I've added potting soil into the planter, all right, and maybe you can even have a little pressing so that there is no air that is just taking the space. Okay, so let me add a little of the soil on this. So this is a potting soil, right? Next, I have to go and choose a good vegetative propagule, or a plant that I want to be propagating vegetatively, right? And for which we are going to be doing cutting, right? So you can be having any of your choices, but for now, what I have chosen is, this is a very common plant, garden plant, flower. Most of you might be even having this at your home, right? So this, the name of this plant is impatiens, okay? So this is a plant which, what I have observed, even I have a kind of a habit of doing a little of gardening now and then. So what I realized is that this is a plant which can be easily or successfully growing out of vegetative propagation by cutting, right? So what you have to do is you have to choose your own plant, okay? It can be any plant. You can go into your garden and choose a good healthy plant, and you have to cut that plant from the parent plant. Okay, so this is what we call as cutting. And what I have done here is I have cut this plant from the parent plant somewhere close to the node. Can you see? So there's a node here at the end. Okay, just very close to the node I've given a cut. And while you're cutting, I would be suggesting that you cut at an angle. Can you see an angle here, right? So instead of having a straight cut, I would say an angled cut would work better, right? So you will have such an angled cut. And then if there are leaves at the base, so because we have to put this into the stem into the soil, so you will pull out the leaves, right? And most probably even I don't need this. There's also a branch here, so I'm going to be cutting off this branch as well. All right, okay, so now here is my cut stem, right? This is a cut stem of impatiens ready for planting, right? So what I do is I take my pot containing soil, right? And in this I would make a hole at the center. Okay, I'm going to be making a hole, and into it I will place my cut stem. Okay, and then I would be making sure that the stem is held properly by the soil. I give a little gentle pressing so that I can place it and make sure that the plant is stable in the soil, right? And if required, you can also add some soil on top of the plant. So this is it. Isn't it very simple? Yes, as simple as this. So this is a means of vegetative propagation, but it is not a natural vegetative propagation because I have done it, or you're going to be doing it. So it is obviously an artificial vegetative propagation. And since we are using a cut stem, all right, so this is going to be the type which is called as cutting, all right. And then after planting it, preferably you're going to be adding little water into this, right? But make sure that you're not having excess of water added into the pot, because that's going to be resulting in pooling of water, right? And pooling of water or water logging isn't very healthy or very good for a plant. Okay, it's going to be depleting plant with oxygen. So have enough of water, all right? And once the water starts actually coming out from your drains here, the holes, that means it has enough of water, right? And then we are going to be placing this in a bright area. Okay, so this is it. And everybody, each one of you will try with your own vegetative propagation, and then make sure you don't forget to share with your pictures or with your videos with me. All right, bye bye everybody.